This story is titled, My Ex-Wife Started Forcing Me to Send My Little Girl to a Live-In School, convincing me that my daughter wasn't legally part of our family list and was just our youthful mistake, while her golden siblings deserved everything. But I took her side and said I'd stay with her and cut off the rest because I can't accept this. It's my choice only. Hey Reddit, my name is Tyler, and I'm 33 years old. I live in Dallas and work as a marketing director at a major advertising agency where I make around $180,000 annually. This comfortable salary allows me to live well, but it wasn't always this way. I worked my ass off to get where I am today. When I graduated from college, I started as a junior coordinator, making only $42,000 a year. For years, I pulled 65-hour weeks, constantly pushing myself to prove my worth. I earned my marketing certifications and slowly climbed the corporate ladder, one promotion at a time. Now my colleagues respect me. Clients trust me with their most important campaigns, and I genuinely love the creative challenge of brand strategy and campaign optimization. For the past 5 years, I've been single after my previous relationship ended in the most devastating way possible. My ex decided she wanted to find herself, which apparently meant sleeping with half the guys in our friend group. That betrayal really messed me up for a long time. I had trusted her completely and was even looking at engagement rings when I discovered she'd been cheating for months. The worst part wasn't just the infidelity itself. It was how she tried to gaslight me when I confronted her about it. She made me think I was controlling and emotionally unavailable, twisting the situation to make me question my own sanity. After that disaster, I threw myself completely into work and honestly became pretty isolated. I spent most weekends alone, ordering Chinese food and binge-watching Netflix. My life felt empty and meaningless despite my success. I had money, a nice condo, and a thriving career, but I'd come home to complete silence every night. Whenever I saw families at restaurants or parks, I'd feel this hollow ache in my chest, wondering if I'd ever have that kind of connection. During one particularly tough therapy session, my therapist really pushed me. Tyler, you're financially successful but emotionally bankrupt, she said bluntly. You're hiding from life because one person hurt you. That's not living, that's just existing. Her words stung because they were absolutely true. She suggested I try volunteering somewhere to get out of my own head and maybe find some purpose beyond profit margins and advertising campaigns. I decided to start spending Saturday mornings at a local children's home, helping with activities, and just being present for kids who needed positive male role models. The first few weeks were awkward as hell. I had no idea how to talk to children and felt like they could sense I was this uptight marketing guy trying too hard. But the staff was patient with me, and I gradually started relaxing around the kids. That's where I met Lily. She was barely 3 years old when I first saw her, sitting alone in the corner of the playroom while other kids ran around laughing and playing. She had these enormous brown eyes and the most serious expression I'd ever seen on such a young face. While other toddlers were having meltdowns or demanding attention, Lily just sat quietly watching everything with this intense focus that seemed way too mature for her age. Her caseworker, Karen, explained Lily's heartbreaking situation to me. Lily had been in the system since she was only 8 months old, after her birth parents lost custody due to drug addiction. She's been through 5 different foster homes, Karen told me with a heavy sigh. She's not a problem child or anything. She's actually remarkably well behaved, but she's so quiet and withdrawn that families tend to overlook her for more outgoing kids. The details of Lily's abandonment were even more crushing. No relatives had wanted to take her in when she needed them most. Her maternal grandmother had bluntly said she was too old to start over with a baby, and her father's family wanted absolutely nothing to do with her. This tiny girl had been rejected by everyone who should have loved her unconditionally. Something about this quiet, careful child just grabbed my heart and wouldn't let go. She was so cautious and reserved, like she was afraid of taking up too much space in the world or causing any trouble. I started requesting to work specifically with the younger kids just so I could spend more time with her. Over the months, she slowly started warming up to me, though it was a gradual process that required infinite patience. I remember the exact moment she first smiled at me. It's burned into my memory forever. I was reading Where the Wild Things Are to a group of toddlers, and Lily had positioned herself just close enough to hear the story, but far enough away to escape if she needed to. When I got to the part about Max taming the wild things, I did this dramatic, roaring voice that made all the kids giggle. Lily's serious little face broke into this tiny, secret smile that completely melted my heart. From that moment, it was a series of tiny steps forward. She'd sit a little closer during story time each week, Then she'd actually approach me during activities instead of waiting for me to come to her. One day she brought me a drawing she'd made, just scribbles to anyone else, but she very seriously explained that it was a house with a daddy and a little girl living inside. I still have that drawing framed in my office today. The real breakthrough came about 7 months into our relationship. Lily had fallen and scraped her knee during outdoor play, and while the other staff members tried to comfort her, she pushed past them and ran straight to me with her arms up, wanting me to hold her. As I cleaned her knee and put on a Mickey Mouse Band-Aid, she looked up at me with those enormous brown eyes and asked, "Tyler, will you be my daddy?" I had to excuse myself and go cry in the bathroom for 15 minutes. The raw hope and vulnerability in her voice, combined with how much I'd grown to love this little girl, overwhelmed me completely. After about 9 months of building this incredible relationship, I realized with absolute certainty that I wanted to adopt her. The social workers were initially skeptical because I was a single man with no parenting experience, but I had several things working in my favor. I had a stable income, owned my condo outright, and had already passed all their background checks during the volunteer screening process. The adoption process turned out to be incredibly lengthy and expensive, nearly $14,000 in legal fees alone, not counting court costs and various other requirements. I had to take mandatory parenting classes, undergo extensive psychological evaluations, and endure multiple home inspections where they scrutinized everything from kitchen cabinet locks to my internet browsing history. The worst part was the agonizing waiting periods between each step of the process. I'd lie awake at night terrified that some bureaucrat would decide I wasn't suitable parent material, or that Lily would be adopted by someone else while I was stuck in paperwork purgatory. Karen reassured me that Lily had shown clear attachment to me and that the agency preferred to honor those bonds when possible, but the anxiety was absolutely brutal. I'll never forget the court hearing where the adoption was finally finalized. Lily wore this adorable little purple dress that we'd picked out together specifically for the occasion. She was so excited she kept bouncing in her seat, barely able to contain herself. When the judge asked if she wanted me to be her daddy forever, she practically shouted, "Yes!" with such joy that the entire courtroom was smiling. I was trying my hardest not to ugly cry in front of everyone, but every penny spent and every stressful moment had been worth it for that single moment. The day I brought Lily home was absolutely the best day of my entire life. She walked into my condo carrying her little suitcase and her beloved stuffed rabbit, looked around with wide eyes and asked, "Is this really my home now, Daddy?" I nearly broke down crying right there on the spot. The first few weeks were definitely an adjustment period for both of us. Lily would wake up some mornings and seem genuinely surprised to still be there, like she expected this arrangement to be temporary too. She was almost too well behaved during those early days, clearly afraid that any mistake might get her sent away again. It took months of consistency and patience for her to really believe that this was permanent, that I wasn't going anywhere, and that she was safe. That was 4 years ago, and she's now 7 years old, the absolute center of my universe. She's blossomed into this incredible little person who's curious about everything, genuinely kind to others, and funny in ways that catch me completely off guard. She loves art projects and gets genuinely excited about nature documentaries. She also has very strong opinions about which breakfast cereals are acceptable. Apparently, Cocoa Puffs are too sugary for her refined palate, but Cheerios are perfectly balanced. Watching her grow and discover herself has been the greatest privilege of my life. Now here's where I need to explain my family situation, because it's crucial context for everything that happened later. My parents, David and Patricia, are basically professional moochers who have spent most of their adult lives looking for easy money instead of actually working for it. My dad used to work in insurance sales but got fired from multiple companies for being lazy and unreliable. He'd show up late, leave early, and then act shocked when customers complained about his complete lack of follow-through. My mom worked part-time as a receptionist at various offices, but she would quit whenever she decided the job was beneath her standards or whenever someone asked her to actually do work. I have vivid memories from childhood of them constantly scheming for their next windfall. Dad would spend hours researching get-rich-quick schemes, pyramid schemes, cryptocurrency investments, real estate flipping programs he saw on late-night TV infomercials. Mom would guilt-trip elderly relatives for loans they never intended to repay. They taught me and my younger sister Jessica that smart people work the system, not for the system, which sounds inspiring until you realize it's just code for be a parasite. For years now, they've been living off unemployment benefits, occasional inheritance money from relatives, and constant handouts from family members. They live way beyond their means, always buying expensive things they can't afford and then crying poverty when the bills come due. Their house is filled with luxury items they purchased during brief periods of financial optimism. A $4,000 leather sectional, an 80-inch TV, designer handbags that cost more than most people's rent. My younger sister Jessica is somehow even worse than our parents. She's 31 years old and has never held a steady job for more than 8 months. She has 2 daughters, Sophie, who's 9, and Maya, who's 7, from 2 different relationships with guys who both disappeared when things got serious. Jessica lives in a rundown apartment and constantly begs everyone in the family for money, claiming she's just going through a rough patch that's been lasting for basically her entire adult life. Jessica has absolutely mastered the art of emotional manipulation. She'll call crying about how she can't afford groceries for the girls, then post Instagram photos the next day of her new acrylic nails or a night out at some trendy bar. When confronted about these obvious inconsistencies, she'll deflect with accusations that people are judging her or don't understand how hard it is to be a single mom. Her kids, Sophie and Maya, are completely spoiled because my parents shower them with gifts and attention to compensate for their unstable home life. They expect to get new toys every single time they visit, along with special trips to fun places and constant praise for doing absolutely nothing special. They've learned to weaponize their cuteness, putting on dramatic performances about being poor and needing help whenever they want something. When I first told my family about adopting Lily, their reaction was absolutely disgusting. Why would you waste your money on someone else's problem child when you could find a nice woman and have your own kids? My mother said right in front of Lily during one of our first family visits. My dad was even more blunt and cruel. She's not really your daughter, Tyler. It's not the same as having your own blood. I'll never forget Lily's face during that first family dinner. She was only 4 years old and had been so excited about meeting her new grandparents. She'd worn a little pink dress she'd picked out specifically for the occasion and had practiced saying, "Hi, Grandma, hi, Grandpa," in the car on the way over. But they barely acknowledged her existence, responding to her enthusiastic greeting with dismissive nods, before immediately asking me about my plans for finding a real family. The favoritism was immediate and absolutely cruel. During that same visit, Sophie and Maya arrived and were greeted with squeals of excitement, hugs, kisses, and immediate presence. Lily watched from the corner, clutching my hand tightly as her cousins got showered with affection while she was completely ignored. When she tried to join in their play, Sophie actually said, "You can't play with us. Grandma said you're not really family." But here's the thing that really gets me angry. Once they realized how much money I was making and how financially stable I was, they suddenly became very interested in maintaining a close relationship with me. Not with Lily, mind you, just with me and my bank account. They'd invite me over for family dinners where they'd completely ignore Lily while fawning over Jessica's kids. They'd make comments about how successful I'd become and how proud they were, which was obviously code for "we need money and you're our best bet." The manipulation was so obvious it was almost insulting. My mother would call and start conversations with, "Oh, I was just thinking about what a wonderful provider you've become," before launching into some manufactured financial crisis. Dad would corner me at family gatherings to ask detailed questions about my salary and investment portfolio, all while Lily sat alone at the kids' table being ignored by her cousins. They'd guilt-trip me about family loyalty while treating my daughter like she was invisible. "Family takes care of family" became my mother's favorite phrase, usually delivered while Lily was in earshot. The message was crystal clear. I was family and had obligations, but Lily was just some outsider who happened to live with me. When I'd bring Lily to family gatherings, she'd try so incredibly hard to get their attention and approval. She'd draw them pictures that they'd glance at and set aside without comment. She'd try to help in the kitchen, only to be told she was in the way. She'd attempt to join conversations only to have them talk over her, like she wasn't even there. I watched my bright, confident daughter slowly become more subdued and anxious around my family. She'd prepare for visits by asking what she could do to make them like her more. "Daddy, should I draw Grandpa a picture of his car? Maybe if I'm really good, Grandma will want to play with me." It was absolutely heartbreaking to watch. About 3 years ago, my parents came to me with tears in their eyes, claiming they were about to lose their house. Dad's latest unemployment benefits had run out, and Mom couldn't find work anywhere, though she'd applied to maybe 3 places total. They were 4 months behind on their mortgage payments. "Tyler, we don't know what else to do," my mother sobbed dramatically. "We're going to lose everything. This house has all our memories, all your childhood memories. You're the only one who can save us." My dad played up the guilt angle. "Son, we raised you in this house. We sacrificed so much to give you a good foundation. Now we need you to help us keep it." The performance was absolutely Oscar-worthy. Mom had clearly been crying before I arrived, her makeup strategically smudged. Dad had gathered stacks of bills and foreclosure notices, arranging them dramatically on the kitchen table like evidence in a trial. They'd even included photos of me as a child around the house, subtle reminders of our shared history. Their mortgage payment was $2,800 per month, which they obviously couldn't afford on their non-existent income. They promised they'd pay me back as soon as they got back on their feet, swearing it would only be temporary until they found stable work. They had a whole timeline mapped out. Dad would find a sales job within 3 months, Mom would go back to administrative work, and they'd be financially independent by New Year's. I was making good money and wanted Lily to have a relationship with her extended family. So like an absolute idiot, I agreed to take over their mortgage payments. I set up automatic transfers from my account to theirs every month, thinking this would be a short-term solution to help them get back on their feet. But that was just the beginning of what would become a complete financial nightmare. Soon, the emergency calls started coming regularly, each one more ridiculous than the last. There were car repairs that somehow cost $1,600 because Dad refused to take their luxury sedan anywhere but the dealership for service. Medical bills for $1,100 for Mom's specialist appointments that turned out to be cosmetic procedures she thought she deserved. Home repairs that mysteriously cost $2,500 because they hired the most expensive contractors instead of shopping around for reasonable quotes. Then there was Jessica's rent when she got evicted from her apartment. $1,850 plus a security deposit for her new place. And of course, there were the grocery bills because they were struggling to eat, which somehow cost $700 per month. When I offered to take them shopping at Costco to help stretch their budget, they were genuinely offended. "We're not poor people, Tyler. We have standards," they said with indignation. Apparently, those standards included organic produce, premium steaks, and name-brand everything, all purchased with my hard-earned money. I was basically supporting 3 households on my salary, shelling out nearly $8,200 monthly to keep my family afloat. That's $98,400 per year of my post-tax income going to people who showed absolutely zero gratitude and treated my daughter like garbage. Did they show any appreciation for this massive financial support? Absolutely not. The handouts became expected, like I owed them this money simply for existing. They'd call me demanding cash like it was my obligation. "Tyler, we need $800 for groceries and gas this month." Not asking politely, but telling me like it was a given fact. There was never any acknowledgement that I was sacrificing my own financial security for their comfort. The absolute worst part was discovering what they were actually spending the money on. While crying poverty to me, they were taking Sophie and Maya on expensive outings, Disney World trips that cost $300 plus admission, shopping sprees at Target where they'd buy $600 worth of toys, meals at restaurants that cost more than what I'd spend feeding Lily and myself for an entire week. When I questioned these obviously excessive expenses, my mother would get defensive and indignant. "Those girls deserve nice things," she'd say. "They're going through a hard time with Jessica's situation. We're just trying to give them some stability and happiness." Meanwhile, Lily would watch these adventures through their social media posts, wondering why she never got invited to be part of the stability and happiness they were providing. Every single time I brought Lily to family gatherings, the favoritism was absolutely disgusting to watch. Sophie and Maya would get brand new toys every visit, expensive stuff my parents definitely couldn't afford, but were buying with money I was sending them. We're talking about $60 Barbie playsets, $90 Lego sets, American Girl doll accessories that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. They'd take the girls on special outings to amusement parks, movies, and restaurants, always excluding Lily from these activities. I remember one particularly awful Christmas morning when Lily was 5 years old. She'd been so excited about spending the holiday with her grandparents and cousins, talking about it for weeks leading up to the day. She'd made handmade gifts for everyone, painted rocks for my parents and friendship bracelets for Sophie and Maya. She'd carefully wrapped them in tissue paper and put them under the tree. Sophie and Maya each received literal piles of presents, tablets, expensive clothes, jewelry, games, and toys. The scene looked like a toy store had exploded in the living room. Lily sat there with her one small gift, a generic coloring book and crayons that were clearly an afterthought, watching her cousins tear through wrapping paper while squealing with excitement. When Lily tried to join in their activities or play with the toys they'd bought for her cousins, my parents would make pointed comments like, "Be very careful with that, it's not yours." Or, "Those are special toys for special girls." Lily would sit there watching her cousins get all this attention and love while being completely ignored and excluded. The comments became increasingly pointed and cruel over time. "Well, some children appreciate what they're given," my mother would say when Lily expressed any disappointment. "Some children understand that treats are earned, not expected." The implication was crystal clear. Lily hadn't earned the same treatment because she wasn't really family in their eyes. When Lily tried to show them her artwork from school, they'd barely glance at it before setting it aside. But when Sophie or Maya brought home any scrap of paper with crayon marks, it would get enthusiastic praise and prominent display on the refrigerator. Lily started keeping her art projects to herself after a while, showing them only to me because she'd learned that nobody else cared. The worst part was the constant comments about her adoption status, made right in front of her. "Well, it's different with real family," they'd say casually. Or, "Blood relatives have a special connection that can't be replicated." Lily was too young to fully understand what they meant, but I could see it hurt her feelings and made her try even harder to win their approval. One day, Lily asked me a question that broke my heart into pieces. "Daddy, what does real family mean? Grandma says Sophie and Maya are real family, but I'm not. Does that mean I'm fake?" I had to explain that some people have small hearts and don't understand that families are made by love, not just DNA. But it killed me that she even had to ask that question. The emotional damage was becoming increasingly obvious with each family visit. Lily, who had been gaining confidence and developing her personality since I adopted her, started becoming withdrawn and anxious before we'd go see my family. She'd spend hours getting ready for these visits, trying to pick the perfect outfit that might win their approval. She'd practice conversation topics in the car, hoping to find something that would make them pay attention to her for once. After visits, she'd be quiet and sad for days afterward. She'd ask heartbreaking questions like, "Why don't they like me? And what can I do to make them love me?" It was absolutely devastating to watch this confident, creative child blame herself for other people's cruelty and small-mindedness. 4 months ago, I had an absolutely crucial day at work that would change everything. We were finalizing a major client campaign, restructuring that could potentially lead to a promotion and significant bonus. This wasn't just any ordinary client. We were talking about a $150 million account for a tech startup going public. I'd been working on this account for 10 months, and the presentation had to be absolutely perfect. The creative concepts had to be flawless, and the client meetings couldn't be rescheduled under any circumstances. I had back-to-back meetings scheduled from 7 o'clock in the morning until nearly 10 o'clock at night, including client presentations, contract negotiations, and team coordination sessions. My boss had made it crystal clear that this was a make-or-break opportunity for my career. "Tyler, if we land this account, you're looking at a promotion to creative director level and a 6-figure bonus," he told me. "If we lose it because of any preventable screw-ups, there will be serious consequences for everyone involved." My regular babysitter, Mrs. Rodriguez, caught the flu and had to cancel at the last minute. She called me at 5:45 a.m., barely able to speak, apologizing profusely for the short notice. I was completely stuck and starting to panic because this work commitment was absolutely non-negotiable. I called every backup sitter I could think of, but it was too short notice for anyone to help. My neighbor wasn't available, my backup sitter was out of town, and professional childcare services needed 24-hour advanced booking. Against every instinct I had, I decided to ask my parents if Lily could spend the day at their house. I'd avoided leaving her alone with them for any extended period because of their obvious favoritism and cruel treatment. But I was desperate and running out of time with no other options. When I called my mother at 6:15 a.m., she sounded almost enthusiastic about the idea, which should have been my first red flag. "Of course, bring her over early," she said cheerfully. "Jessica is dropping off Sophie and Maya for the day too, so all 3 girls can play together and bond. It'll be perfect. Maybe this will finally give us a chance to get to know Lily better." I should have recognized this as a massive warning sign, but I was stressed about work and running out of options. The idea of Lily spending quality time with her cousins actually sounded nice in my desperation. Maybe this would finally be the day my parents would step up and act like proper grandparents. Maybe they'd realize how wonderful Lily was if they spent real time with her instead of just seeing her briefly at family gatherings. That morning, I packed Lily's little purple backpack with her favorite toys, some snacks, extra clothes in case they went to the park, and her special stuffed rabbit for comfort. She was absolutely thrilled about spending the whole day with Sophie and Maya, bouncing with excitement. "Daddy, maybe today Grandma and Grandpa will play games with me like they do with my cousins," she said, with such hope in her voice that it made my heart ache. "Maybe we'll bake cookies together, or they'll read me stories just like they do for Sophie and Maya." I dropped her off around 6:45 in the morning, kissed her goodbye, and promised I'd pick her up after my meetings finished. She ran into the house excitedly, ready for what she thought would be a fun day with family. I watched her skip through their front door and felt optimistic for the first time about her relationship with my parents. The workday was absolutely brutal from start to finish. It was meeting after meeting, constantly putting out fires and dealing with difficult clients who kept changing their requirements at the last minute. The campaign negotiations went much longer than expected because the client's board kept requesting modifications to our creative strategy. I barely had time to grab a bagel for lunch, much less call to check on how Lily was doing. By 3:30 p.m., I was starting to worry about how she was managing, but I was in the middle of a critical presentation to the client's executive team. I sent a quick text to my mother. "How's Lily doing? Having fun with the girls?" I got back a simple "fine, all good here," which should have been reassuring but felt oddly brief and dismissive. The afternoon stretched into evening as the client requested additional creative concepts and market analyses. My team was scrambling to develop new campaign ideas while I fielded constant questions about target demographics and budget allocation. By 7:30 p.m., I was emotionally and physically drained, but we were finally making progress toward closing the deal. I texted my parents again. "Running late, we'll pick up Lily by 9:30. Hope she's not too tired." This time, I got no response at all, which was unusual, but I figured they were probably busy with bedtime routines for the kids. When we finally wrapped up around 9:15 p.m., it was with a tentative handshake deal worth millions to our agency. My boss clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Outstanding work today, Tyler. This is going to change your career trajectory completely." I should have been absolutely ecstatic about this professional victory, but all I could think about was getting to Lily and hearing about her day with her cousins. I was exhausted but also excited to pick up Lily and hear all about her day with her cousins. I imagined her telling me about games they'd played, stories Grandma had read them, or maybe even that my parents had finally shown her some real affection and attention. Perhaps they'd taken the girls to the park, or baked cookies together, or just spent time playing and bonding like a normal, loving family. When I pulled into my parents' driveway around 9:45 p.m., I could hear voices coming from inside the house through the front windows. They sounded loud and angry, which seemed weird for what should have been a quiet evening with tired kids. The lights were all on throughout the house, which was also strange since it was well past the girls' usual bedtime. I walked up to the front door and could hear my mother's voice clearly, angrier than I'd ever heard her before in my entire life. "Wash those dishes properly? Good grief, you're so useless!" she was screaming. "Look at this mess you're making. No wonder nobody wanted you before Tyler took pity on you." My stomach dropped like a stone. Who was she screaming at like that? I opened the front door and walked inside, and what I saw made me feel physically sick to my core. There was my 7-year-old Lily, standing on a wooden step stool at the kitchen sink with her little arms elbow deep in soapy water. She was washing what looked like dinner dishes and several pots and pans, struggling with items that were almost too heavy for her to hold safely. She was crying silently, tears streaming down her red, exhausted face as she tried to scrub a large serving bowl. Her clothes were completely soaked with soap and water. Her hair was messy and wet with soap suds clinging to the strands. She was visibly shaking from exhaustion and probably hunger, since it was way past dinner time and she was still working. Her little hands were pruned and red from being in hot, soapy water for what must have been hours. Meanwhile, Sophie and Maya were sprawled comfortably on the couch in the living room, wearing matching new pajamas and eating elaborate ice cream sundaes complete with whipped cream and cherries. Brand new toys were scattered around them. Obviously expensive stuff that my parents had bought them with the money I'd been sending for emergencies. They were pointing at Lily and giggling cruelly at her struggles, making comments like, "Look how slow she is. And she's getting water everywhere." My parents were standing in the kitchen doorway like supervisors, watching Lily work while making critical comments about her technique and speed. "Scrub harder. That's still dirty," my father barked. "How long does it take to wash one simple bowl?" my mother added with disgust. "Maybe if you weren't so clumsy, this would go faster." "What the hell is going on here?" I said loudly, and everyone turned to look at me. Lily saw me and immediately started sobbing harder, her small voice breaking as she tried to explain. "Daddy, I tried to do it right, but I'm not good at it. I've been trying so hard, but they keep saying I'm doing everything wrong." I rushed over and immediately lifted her down from the stool. She was trembling all over, and her little hands were wrinkled and red from being in hot, soapy water for hours. She smelled like dish detergent and looked absolutely exhausted. She immediately wrapped her arms around my neck and buried her face in my shoulder, sobbing uncontrollably. "Why is my daughter washing dishes while her cousins are eating ice cream and watching TV?" I asked my parents, trying to keep my voice calm but failing completely. The rage was building inside me like a volcano about to erupt. My mother rolled her eyes at me like I was being completely ridiculous and overdramatic. "Oh, please, Tyler, don't be so dramatic," she said dismissively. "We're teaching her some responsibility and work ethic. Kids these days are too spoiled and entitled. A little hard work never hurt anyone." My father nodded in agreement, as if they were being perfectly reasonable. "She needs to learn her place in this family structure," he said matter-of-factly. "Sophie and Maya don't have to do chores because they're real granddaughters with real family connections. Lily should be grateful we're teaching her valuable life skills that will help her later in life. Real granddaughters." There it was, finally said out loud, after 4 years of subtle hints and implications. Lily wasn't really family to them. She was just some charity case I'd forced them to tolerate. And they thought she should be grateful for any attention at all, even if that attention meant being treated like unpaid household help. "Her place?" I repeated, feeling rage building up inside me like nothing I'd ever experienced before. "She's 7 years old. Her place is playing with toys and being a kid, not scrubbing dishes while you spoil Jessica's children with my money." My mother got defensive and started making pathetic excuses. "Don't make this into something it's not, Tyler," she said, trying to sound reasonable. "We fed her lunch and she was playing earlier. We just asked her to help clean up after dinner. It's perfectly reasonable to expect children to clean up after themselves." That was complete garbage, and everyone in that room knew it. Lily is the most careful, neat child in the world. She never makes messes because she's always trying so hard to be perfect and not cause any trouble. But even if she had made a mess, making a 7-year-old wash a sink full of dishes while the other kids get treats and entertainment is nothing short of cruel abuse. "You know what?" I said, grabbing Lily's backpack from the counter with shaking hands. "You're absolutely right about one thing. She doesn't belong here because she deserves so much better than this disgusting treatment." My father actually had the audacity to say, "Well, maybe you should have thought about that before forcing someone else's unwanted child into our family dynamic." That was the final straw. I picked up Lily, grabbed all her things, and headed straight for the door. As I was leaving, I turned back and said with ice-cold fury, "Don't ever contact me again. We're done." The drive home was absolutely heartbreaking. Lily was quiet for most of the trip, just staring out the window with this lost, confused expression on her little face. I could see her processing what had happened, trying to make sense of why the people who were supposed to love her had treated her so cruelly. Finally, she asked in her small, broken voice, "Daddy, why don't Grandma and Grandpa love me like they love Sophie and Maya? What did I do wrong?" The pain in her voice was like a knife to my heart. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that some people are just small-minded and cruel? How do you tell your daughter that the people who should love her unconditionally have decided she's not worth their affection because she doesn't share their DNA? How do you make a child understand that their rejection says everything about them and nothing about her? "You didn't do anything wrong, sweetheart," I told her, my voice thick with emotion. "Some people just don't know how to see how special and wonderful you are. But I love you more than anything in the whole world. And that's what really matters. You're my daughter, and nothing will ever change that." That night, after putting Lily to bed and making sure she felt safe and loved, I sat in my home office and made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to continue financially supporting people who treated my daughter like she was worthless. If they couldn't love Lily, then they didn't deserve anything from me, not a single penny. The next morning, I called my bank and canceled all automatic transfers to my parents' account. I also called my credit card company and canceled the emergency card I'd given them for unexpected expenses. Then, I called the joint account I'd set up for their monthly allowances and closed it completely, transferring any remaining funds back to my personal account. I didn't warn them or give them any notice. I wanted them to discover the financial cutoff on their own and really feel the impact of losing their safety net. They'd made their choice about what kind of people they wanted to be, and now they could live with the consequences. It took exactly 5 months for the first panicked phone call to come. My father called me in a complete frenzy because the bank had sent them a formal foreclosure notice after several missed mortgage payments. His voice was shaking with panic and desperation. "Tyler, there's been some kind of mistake with the mortgage payment," he said frantically. "It didn't go through for months, and the bank is starting foreclosure proceedings. There must be some error with the automatic transfer system." "That's not a mistake," I said calmly, feeling a sense of satisfaction I'd never experienced before. "I canceled all the payments. You're completely on your own now." There was dead silence on the phone for several long seconds. Then my mother grabbed the phone and started crying hysterically, her voice becoming increasingly desperate and shrill. "Tyler, you cannot do this to us," she sobbed. "We'll lose our house. We have nowhere else to go. You're our son. How can you abandon us like this?" "I was your son," I replied with ice-cold calm. "But you made it crystal clear that Lily isn't your granddaughter, so that means I'm not your son either. Family works both ways." They tried every manipulation tactic they could think of over the following weeks. There were guilt trips about family loyalty and obligation, sob stories about becoming homeless elderly people, and promises that they'd treat Lily better if I'd just give them another chance. I didn't believe any of it for a second. "If you cared about family," I told them during one of their desperate calls, "you would have treated my daughter like she belonged from day one. Instead, you used her as free labor while spoiling Jessica's kids with money I earned through my hard work." Within a week of that conversation, Jessica called me absolutely furious, her voice filled with indignation and disbelief. "How could you do this to Mom and Dad?" she screamed into the phone. "They're going to lose everything. They're your parents. How can you be so heartless over something so stupid?" "Stupid?" I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "They had my 7-year-old daughter doing dishes for hours while your kids ate ice cream and got new toys. If you think that's acceptable treatment, then you can help them yourself." Of course, Jessica couldn't help because she was completely broke too, and had been relying entirely on handouts from our parents, handouts that were funded entirely by my money. The irony wasn't lost on me. About 7 months after I cut them off completely, the inevitable happened. My parents lost their house to foreclosure. The bank auctioned it off to recover their losses, and my parents had to move into a tiny rundown apartment in the worst part of town. The luxury items they'd accumulated over the years had to be sold off piece by piece to pay for basic necessities. My mother had to get a job working overnight shifts at a gas station, dealing with difficult customers and cleaning bathrooms for $13 an hour. My father started delivering food for various apps, working 14-hour days just to make ends meet and barely earning enough to cover their basic expenses. The irony was absolutely delicious. These people who had looked down on common laborers and service workers for years were now discovering exactly how difficult those jobs really are. Dad, who used to complain about fast food workers being too slow, was now racing against delivery time limits to earn $9 per delivery. Mom, who used to demand premium customer service everywhere she went, was now dealing with rude customers who treated her like she was invisible. Jessica lost her apartment too when she couldn't afford rent without help from our parents. She had to move in with some guy she barely knew, taking her 2 kids into an unstable and potentially dangerous situation. Last I heard, that relationship imploded within 3 months, and she's been couch surfing with various relatives and friends ever since. The girls, Sophie and Maya, had to change schools because they couldn't afford their old district anymore. No more expensive toys, no more special outings, no more treats and privileges. They went from being spoiled princesses to children whose grandmother works graveyard shifts at a gas station and whose mother can't afford basic school supplies. But the absolute best part came about 9 months after everything fell apart for them. They showed up at my front door on a cold, rainy evening, looking completely defeated and desperate. It was like seeing ghosts of the people they used to be. My mother had obviously been crying for hours before they arrived. Her hair was messy and unkempt, her clothes were cheap and wrinkled, and she looked like she'd aged 15 years in just a few months. The designer handbags and expensive jewelry were long gone, replaced by a worn-out purse from Walmart and no makeup to hide the stress lines around her eyes. My father, who had always been too proud to admit when he was wrong about anything, looked completely broken and humbled. His expensive car had been repossessed months ago, and they'd clearly walked several blocks in the rain to get to my house. The man who used to lecture me about success and taking advantage of opportunities was now standing on my doorstep like a beggar. "Tyler, please," my mother begged, her voice cracking with desperation. "We made a terrible mistake. We're so sorry about how we treated Lily. We didn't realize how much it would hurt her feelings. Please forgive us and help us get back on our feet." My father, swallowing his pride completely for probably the first time in his adult life, added with genuine desperation in his voice, "Son, we were wrong. We should have loved Lily from the very beginning. We see that now. We're family, and we need to stick together. Please don't let us lose everything over this misunderstanding." They tried every angle they could think of to manipulate me back into supporting them. There were promises to treat Lily like their real granddaughter, offers to babysit her whenever I needed help, and claims that they'd learned their lesson and would never show favoritism again. They even brought photos of Lily that they claimed to have been carrying in their wallets, obviously recent prints they'd taken from my Facebook page in a desperate attempt to prove their newfound affection. I looked at them standing there in their cheap clothes, begging me for money after years of treating my daughter like garbage, and felt absolutely nothing. No guilt, no sympathy, no sense of family obligation. Nothing at all. "You had 4 years to love my daughter," I said quietly, my voice completely calm and emotionless. "Instead, you used me for money while making her feel worthless and unwanted. Now you've lost everything, and suddenly you want to be a loving family. Sorry, but it's too late for that." "Please," my mother sobbed, her desperation becoming more pathetic by the second. "We'll do anything. We'll make it up to Lily. We'll be the grandparents she deserves. Just please help us get through this rough patch." "Here's the thing," I told them, crossing my arms and looking them directly in the eyes. "You showed me exactly who you really are when you thought you had power over the situation. You're not good people who made a mistake. You're selfish, cruel people who only care about others when you need something from them. I don't want people like that in Lily's life, period." My father tried one last desperate appeal to my emotions, his voice breaking with what seemed like genuine panic. "Tyler, we're your parents. We raised you. We taught you right from wrong. Don't let us become homeless over this. What would people think if they knew you abandoned your own parents?" "What would people think?" I repeated with bitter amusement. "You mean the same people who might find out that you made a 7-year-old do hours of manual labor while spoiling your other grandchildren? I think they'd understand my decision perfectly." I watched my sobbing parents stumble back to their beat-up borrowed car in the rain, completely defeated and broken. It was honestly the most satisfying sight I'd experienced in years. They'd finally learned that actions have consequences, and that treating people like garbage eventually catches up with you. Meanwhile, Lily is absolutely thriving without their toxic influence in her life. She's confident and happy, talented at painting and piano, and has developed real friendships with kids who appreciate her for who she is. We've built beautiful traditions together. Pancakes shaped like dinosaurs on Sunday mornings, nature walks where we collect interesting rocks, and blanket fort movie nights where we watch her favorite films. These are the childhood memories I want her to have. Memories of being loved unconditionally, valued for who she is, and treated like the precious gift she's always been. She deserves to grow up knowing that she's wanted and cherished, not constantly trying to earn love that should be freely given. Meanwhile, my parents continue to struggle with their minimum wage jobs and mounting health problems in their tiny apartment. The stress of their new reality is taking a serious toll on them physically and mentally. My sister Jessica is back to couch surfing with her daughters, and her spoiled children Sophie and Maya are learning harsh lessons about reality. No more princess treatment, no more expensive gifts, no more special privileges. They're all discovering what it's like to live in the real world, where money has to be earned through actual work, and where treating people poorly has real consequences. And honestly, I couldn't be happier about how everything turned out.